had my university exams, and the COVID restrictions were finally easing up. I had to juggle going to campus for my exams and dealing with my crappy job at that awful company. Getting time off from my boss was like pulling teeth. It took so much effort. But I finally managed it after a ton of back and forth. I told my family I was going to stay at the dorm the night before my exam so I could focus and get some proper studying done. But honestly, that was just an excuse. The real reason was that I wanted to ditch my parents and go see Thomas so I could attend his friend's wedding with him. Looking back, I was so naive and dumb. I barely knew his friend and his girlfriend. I'd only met them once. And to top it off, I didn't even have good memories of his soon-to-be wife. One time I went to Thomas's town and stayed the night in a rental house on the outskirts with his friend. Let's call him Kevin. Kevin was a tall, chubby guy with a round face, brown eyes, and a laid-back sporty vibe. He was super chill around me, laughing and chatting non-stop like we'd known each other forever. But his girlfriend, let's call her Deanna, was the complete opposite. She was stiff and distant, barely talked to anyone, and had this cold attitude. Honestly, I always felt like she was kind of jealous of me. I'm not the type to compare looks, because I don't think appearance matters that much. I care more about how people act and who they are inside. But if I'm being real, I looked way better than her. More attractive, classier, you know? I even caught Kevin staring at me a couple of times that night, which made me feel a little awkward. I tried to shake it off and just stuck close to Thomas, even snuggling up to him during dinner to make it clear where I stood. The next morning, we said goodbye to Kevin and Diana, and I swear I could feel how relieved she was that we were leaving. Oh, and I should mention it was Thomas's birthday the next day. I thought about planning a little party with Kevin and Diana, but honestly, her cold vibes put me off. I didn't even bother bringing it up to her or asking Kevin to help me set something up for Thomas. The next day, while Thomas was driving me to the airport, I bought a cake so we could celebrate his birthday together. It was a small celebration, just the two of us, but it felt special. On the drive back, I saw a message pop up on my Instagram. It was from Kevin. He wrote, "Hi, I'm trying to call Thomas, but his phone is off. Tell him his brother had an accident and is in the hospital." Apparently, Kevin had found my account through Thomas's following list. I immediately told Thomas the news. He got super stressed, completely lost his cool, and dropped me off in a rush before speeding back toward the hospital. After I returned to university and finished my exams, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, it was Thomas. He was calling from Kevin's phone because his own battery had died. We talked for a bit and then ended the call. A few days later, I tried calling Thomas, but he didn't answer. Feeling uneasy, I called Kevin to see if he knew where Thomas was. Kevin texted me back on WhatsApp, saying he hadn't heard from him either but guessed Thomas was probably at home. He told me not to worry and to just get some rest. His message helped me calm down, but deep down, I still felt uneasy. One day, while I was scrolling through WhatsApp profile pictures, I have this habit of checking people's profile pics, I suddenly realized Kevin had blocked me. I mean, not just on WhatsApp, but on Instagram too. When I checked other apps, it turned out I was blocked everywhere. I was shocked, upset, and honestly super curious. Like, what the hell happened? Deep down, I had a strong feeling it wasn't Kevin who blocked me. I was 100% sure it was Deanna, using his phone to block me on everything. I called Thomas and told him what happened. His reaction? "Oh, babe, this is just girlish, childish drama. Jealous, immature girls are jealous. Don't even give a damn about it, darling." That's when it hit me. Deanna's jealousy toward me was so real, and even Thomas agreed. Gianna. Fast forward a few months, and I got invited to their wedding, like I said before. Honestly, looking back, I have to admit, going to that wedding was hands down the dumbest, most ridiculous decision I've ever made. She never even apologized for what she did, or should I say, her stupid actions. I booked a flight to their city, but of course I arrived super late. Why? Because I decided to hit the beauty salon in my own town before leaving, since I didn't know any places over there. Big mistake. My makeup turned out horrible. Mean, really bad. One reason was that I couldn't afford a proper makeup artist, and the one I went to just didn't give a damn about how I looked in the end. She didn't even try to make it decent. By the time I realized how awful it was too late to complain or fix it. So there I was, running late and looking like a complete mess. Thomas picked me up from the airport and drove us straight to the wedding party. The first person I saw when we got there was his mom. She looked so young, wearing casual clothes, no makeup at all, or maybe just a tiny bit. She looked effortless. I said hello, and she replied politely, trying to be all warm and friendly. I went ahead and hugged her and even kissed her cheek. In hindsight, I was so naive. As I mentioned, my family and I weren't doing great financially at the time, and I couldn't afford to buy a dress for the wedding. So I borrowed a black blouse and beige pants from a friend. Let me tell you, it did not suit me. I looked so out of place, like I had just thrown something on last minute. When his mom looked at me, she gave me this head-to-toe glance and kind of shook her head subtly, like she was silently judging my whole vibe, my cheap outfit, my terrible makeup, everything. And honestly, she was right. I felt so embarrassed, like I was shrinking right there in front of everyone. I couldn't help but compare myself to the other girlfriends at the party. They looked stunning and classy, like they belonged there. And then there was me, messy, cheap-looking, and completely out of place. It was too much. I could feel tears welling up, and at one point, I actually cried, but quietly, so no one would notice. I sat next to Thomas at the wedding and tried to greet his friends' girlfriends. They barely acknowledged me, just a quick hello, and didn't really make any effort to include me or make me feel less like an outsider. When the wedding ended, I took some pictures with Thomas and the bride. The bride looked uncomfortable the moment she saw me. I could tell she was embarrassed. She knew how cheap and petty her behavior was when she used Kevin's phone to block me on social media. She shook my hand but barely made eye contact, giving me this awkward look from head to toe. Still, I could feel deep down that she regretted everything, and without her saying a single word, I chose to forgive her right then and there. That night, Thomas and I rented a villa outside the city. Honestly, we had such a great time together. We swam, drank, played games, and watched a movie. It was one of those nights that just felt perfect. We woke up the next morning tangled up in each other's arms, peaceful and happy. But that peace didn't last long. I woke up to Thomas's phone ringing. It was his mom. I couldn't hear her exact words at first, but as the conversation went on, her voice got louder, and I could make out bits and pieces of what she was saying. Has she gone back to her city yet? Did she sleep with you last night? Did you two have a sexual relationship? What a disgrace. She's such a whore. I don't like her at all. She looked like a beggar at the wedding. I was so ashamed when she hugged me. People kept asking me, who is she? What's her relationship with your son? I couldn't even answer those questions. Your aunts and my friends were all whispering about it. What the hell is wrong with your choices, Thomas? Her words hit like a slap. I sat there, frozen, hearing every cruel insult she threw my way through Thomas's phone. Thomas didn't realize I could hear his mom's voice because the volume on his phone was a bit too high. I heard every single word she said. Meanwhile, Thomas was pretending she was saying nice things about me, faking it with lines like, "Thanks, Mom. She really liked you too. I know you two are going to be the best mother and daughter-in-law ever. God bless you both. Love you, Mom. Bye." He hung up and I forced a smile, but inside I was boiling. The anger, the hurt. It was growing like a storm, deeper and deeper. I kissed Thomas on the cheek, got up, and ran to the bathroom. As soon as I closed the door, I broke down. Tears streamed down my face as I sobbed silently, pressing my hand over my mouth to keep the noise in. I washed my face, trying to hide the redness in my eyes, and came back out. Thomas was lounging on the couch, looking relaxed as if nothing had happened. I sat next to him, leaned my head on his shoulder, and couldn't stop the tears from falling again. He noticed right away. "Why are you crying?" he asked, sounding genuinely concerned. I couldn't tell him the truth, so I lied. I'll miss you so much." "Miss me? Babe, why would you miss me? We'll see each other again soon. Our families have agreed to the marriage, and before you know it, we'll be together for good. Don't be sad about it. Everything's going to be okay. I'll make sure of it." His words were meant to comfort me, but they just made it worse. He had no idea that I'd heard every cruel thing his mother said. No idea what was eating me alive inside. I asked Thomas, "Babe, how did I look last night?" He smiled and said, "You were the prettiest girl at the wedding, even more beautiful than the bride." He kissed me and hugged me tightly. "Thomas, how was my dress?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Your outfit was great, almost sporty but still classy," he replied. "Really?" I asked again, needing some reassurance. "I always tell you the truth, babe," he said, smiling. We got dressed and headed out. We had breakfast at a little cafe by the beach, and honestly, it was one of the sweetest moments of my life. Later, he drove me to the airport and even bought me a rose before we said goodbye. We waved to each other, and I headed back home. A month later, we arranged a meeting for our families to get to know each other better. They came over to our house, and it was the first time our parents met. His mom seemed a bit more friendly this time, and surprisingly, she and my mom hit it off. They talked and laughed together, and everything felt normal. My mom didn't know that I'd already met his mom before, and I pretended it was our first time meeting too. We discussed our marriage plans, and soon the wedding arrangements were underway. On the wedding day, I have to admit, I looked stunning. I had one of the best makeups I'd ever had, and I was confident in how I looked. But guess what my mother-in-law said when I asked her how I looked? She replied, "My niece was so beautiful on her wedding day, I can't stop thinking about her gorgeous face." I was like, what the hell is she even talking about? Did I ask you about your niece? I didn't give a damn about her niece. You know what? The reason she brought up her niece was because back when Thomas and I were in a long-distance relationship, she kept trying to set him up with her niece. She had this weird obsession with the idea that Thomas should marry her one day. I remember how Thomas used to send me pictures of food and cookies his cousin had made for him, probably to show off her skills and prove she could be a good housewife. WTF, I was so pissed back then. And now, at my wedding, she had the nerve to compare me to her niece again, making me feel like I wasn't good enough. My heart shattered into a million pieces all over again. I didn't say a word about it to my husband and tried to act like everything was fine. In the middle of the wedding, I noticed my mother-in-law crying. Everyone rushed to her with glasses of water, trying to calm her down. Even the videographer and photographer stopped what they were doing and ran to her. At first I thought she had fainted, but then I heard her shouting, "My dear brother, my beloved brother, why did you leave us so soon? Why tonight? Why at my lovely son's wedding?" And just like that, the drama unfolded. I honestly don't know what to call this. Should I call it my bad luck that my husband's uncle passed away on my wedding day? Or was it karma for all the nasty things my mother-in-law had done to me? Her brother died at her son's wedding? Was that her punishment? The thing is, I had never even met my husband's uncle. So, yeah, I felt sad, but at the same time, I didn't really care. It was a weird mix of anger and sympathy. I kept thinking, what if she hadn't announced his death during the wedding? Couldn't she have waited until later? Did she really have to cry that loudly and draw so much attention to herself? She completely ruined our wedding night. My husband was heartbroken, crying on what should have been the happiest day of his life. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a selfish person. I understand grief. But I can't stop wondering about this. Was it really necessary to make such a scene at that moment? Let me tell you about another similar story. It's kind of like what happened on my wedding day, but with a different ending. At my dad's cousin's wedding, the bride's aunt fell and hit her head really hard. She passed away right there. But here's the thing. They didn't tell the bride and groom or anyone else at the party. They quietly took the aunt to the hospital, and the family found out about her passing the next morning. Nobody let the tragedy overshadow the bride and groom's happiness. They all pretended like nothing had happened to protect the joy of the wedding. It's a sad memory, but sometimes I think about how different things could have been at my wedding if my mother-in-law had done the same. You know, because of that memory, I honestly didn't expect my mother-in-law to ruin my wedding, intentionally or not. Every time I watch my wedding video, I can't help but cry. It just reminds me of how unlucky I was that day. Anyway, the wedding basically turned into a funeral. My husband, his whole family, and even some of my relatives booked flights back to their city that same night. The celebration became more like a wake, and I was left alone, crying my eyes out until morning. The next day, I went to work like a robot. My eyes were red and puffy from all the crying. My body ached from the exhaustion of the wedding night, and I could barely keep myself together. But did my awful boss care? Of course not. That jerk didn't even give me a single day off. He just worked me to the bone like I was his personal slave. Even so, all I could think about was going to my husband's city. I missed him so much, and I just wanted to be by his side. Naive and young, I had no idea what my jealous mother-in-law had planned for me. She had something up her sleeve, and I was walking straight into it without a clue. To be continued.